Good evening, everyone, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole special meeting. I have 6:30 p.m. Today is Tuesday, July 5th. With that, if Deputy Clerk Jane Footy could take a roll call.
Albright. Here. Arnold. Arnold. Gray.
Present.
Modif. Present. Reed. Here. Rolke. Steiner.
Here.
I don't know if their mics are on.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Now we
Should do it again.
Check it, yeah.
Arnold.
Present.
Rolke.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And then next up is to approve the agenda. If there's no discussion or alterations, I'll take a motion.
Alder Steiner will motion to approve the agenda.
Alder Rolke will second.
I have a motion from Alder Steiner and a second from Alder Rolke. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Next up is citizen comments. Dave, this is the special meeting about the organizational study. Is this when you wanted to speak?
No, I actually wanted to talk about the ordinance, actually. I just wrote down the study, my bad.
Okay, so you want to go for the regular committee or regular meeting probably? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess my question is, what are we talking about here then?
The organizational study and the ordinance so that, and then we'll either move that forward to the next meeting for adoption or not.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about it.
Okay. If you please.
This one?
Yes, you're good.
Nice. All right, so Dave Koenig, Columbus Water and Light. I just got a few questions on the ordinance and things. One of them is the personnel manual. It says that the Columbus Public Utility Commission may develop personnel and compensation rules unique to the utility, and then submit it as an addendum. I guess my question is now is, our existing personnel manual, is that an addendum already to the city's personnel manual? Because if it's not, it should be included in this now. So our existing personnel manual should be in this. And then the other part of this is the superintendent. It says in here the superintendent has authority to act on behalf of the commission, but yet later on it says reports to the city administrator. Well, my question is why? Why not have the superintendent talk directly to the city council? Adding another layer for somebody to talk to, that's what we're trying to get away from, and it just seems to be causing more problems, and then it'll be duplicating information where you're going to want that person from, or the superintendent, to actually talk to the city council to relay that information instead of relaying it to the city administrator and then back to the city council. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Because with that, that looks a lot like option 3 of the utility restructure. And as noted last time, that the employees of the Water and Light would be resigning. We're trying to get something figured out here for everybody. And, you know, I do like a few of the things in here. It's just, those are my main questions and concerns. And then about the stormwater utility that's in here, the city council, it looks like, doesn't want to have any involvement in that stormwater utility. It just says the superintendent will see everything for that. Well, I would think if that's the case, then the city council would want to look over all that information also for that utility. So that's all I got for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. All right, and then was there anyone else that wasn't able to sign up that wanted to speak for this meeting? All right, then moving forward, next up on the agenda is to review and discuss the combined utility commission ordinance. So I expect everyone had some time to read it over. So to echo one of the things Dave mentioned, the personnel menu, I know that should be an addendum in there. I don't think it was ever formally adopted as an addendum, but go ahead, Kyle.
Correct. I don't believe the current personnel manual was adopted as an addendum to the city's manual, but I think in practice they have sort of followed along, just wasn't really formally following that process.
Okay. Would it be a good idea to have that as an amendment, as an addendum at this time then?
An addendum outside of, before this ordinance?
Well, as we adopt a new ordinance, it should be an addendum on, it should have been already, but since it wasn't, it should be on this one is kind of what I'm going for. So should we create that as an addendum before we adopt this ordinance?
That would be up to the will of the council.
That's where I would be going with it, Trina, or, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I would be in agreement to put the addendum in from the beginning. I think that would make things clarified and everyone a bit more comfortable.
Thank you, Alder. Sorry. All right.
Yeah.
Alder voted.
I think we should wait on the addendum. I just think it makes sense to review it separately and at another point. I think it's fine to say that it stands as is until the council has time to review it and formally adopt it, but I don't think we need anything more than that.
So are you saying we should move forward and add it later, or? Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Alder Albright?
So that was one of the things that I also, and so I just want to, Kyle, can you clarify what that actually means to make it an addendum? I just want to make sure that I am understanding this properly.
So that was language that was in the existing personnel manual since 2012, and I may have been in before. It's essentially saying that all the personnel rules apply. Then there's an addendum that would be attached at the back that would have rules that are somehow different or additional over and above what the city rules are. And if the addendum is silent on something, the regular personnel manual rules. And if it's specifically addressed in the addendum, then the addendum rules.
Okay. All right. I guess I don't have a problem making it an addendum at this point.
Okay, so are you in favor of adding the addendum before we adopt?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts, Alder?
Not really, I didn't hear when the personnel manual was all written, so.
All right, thank you. Oh, and go ahead, thank you.
I have two questions for the council. I read through all of what you are looking at tonight and didn't have a whole lot of things that needed to be changed or even questions, but I had two. I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page with one, you're proposing one utility commission that is going to oversee the 5 individual utilities that you have.
Correct.
Okay, good. Then that solves a lot of the questions that I had. The other question I had is in the very first section. It's 102-56, where you identify the members of the commission and you identify a ratepayer. What exactly are you trying to accomplish by that? The way that reads to me is like a representative of one of the businesses in town that might not be a local resident, but might be someone who obviously pays for utilities. So we should try to figure out a little bit better way to define that word, a representative of a ratepayer or something like that, because you don't want the whole company coming in here to be on the board. You just want one person, I presume.
Go ahead, Alder Moda.
My understanding is we were trying to focus on including ratepayers. We do have a few ratepayers who are outside of the city limits, so we wanted them to have equal ability to serve on the commission.
Are they individuals or are they companies, so to speak?
It would need, I don't know that we clarified that honestly, but I envision individuals. I don't know about others.
Okay. Yeah, I think the way that it reads now is And I can't think of a good example as to who might be outside of the municipality, a company that's outside of the municipality that is still a ratepayer, or actually somebody that is a company that's inside the municipality that's a ratepayer. You would want a representative from that company, not the whole company.
Right.
So, okay, so if we just say a representative of a ratepayer, then that would take care of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
May I ask a question of Attorney Johnson while he's up there? So regarding the addendum that we're talking about tonight for the handbook, because we are proposing to combine all of the utilities, and each different portion may have different specific needs for their labor, does it make sense for the new utility commission, if that's voted upon, go through and ensure that all employees are represented before we add that as an official addendum? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does, and I think you're going to have a potential for conflict, regardless, not conflict among people, but conflict among words, regardless as to how you do this. If the Water and Lake Commission already has a personnel manual and the city has a personnel manual, and you're going to try to put the two of them together, that won't work all that well, unless you add some language that says in the event there's a conflict, the more generous applies or the more strict applies, then you, at least you have a mechanism for that. If you're going to try to marry all of them into one city handbook, that will take a little bit of time because you'll have several issues to work through, I am sure. So I guess if you're just looking at attaching the existing Water and Light Commission as an addendum to the city, then you need to do the first option. And if you're looking at trying to bring everybody under the same policy, the same handbook, then you should take some time and review them both and try to make sure that they all fit. And again, I agree with what Kyle said, that's a choice for the council.
Thank you, Attorney Johnson. That does help clarify a few things. And I think your suggestion on the wording in 10256 will clarify everything. That works well for me. Does the rest of council agree with that portion?
I did have a
Go
couple
ahead.
things though. So I like the ratepayer, and I think his clarification was great. So I actually had the same comment in regards to that section where it's talking about the superintendent is reporting to the city administrator. I don't think, that to me doesn't sound like it was the spirit of what we talked about. And now I'm not finding it, but I had it highlighted. Hold on. I'm trying to find what page it was on again. Yeah, so page 20 of 43, 102-231, it does say that it's the duty of the superintendent to see that the rules and regulations for blah, blah, blah. And it says that they were, maybe that's not the right area, management, executed the condition of all contracts.
That's the very beginning, I think.
Is it the very beginning? Sorry.
It is, yeah, page 5, number 2 at the very top.
I think I think the intention of that is to ensure that the superintendent is talking directly with the city administrator. The council doesn't meet daily, and there are things that happen daily. I think that's more of to have open lines of communication is the spirit of that. It may be a different wording to clarify that it's to increase communication as opposed to a direct
I don't
report.
know. Do we have wording for this in like the
It seemed
police
to me the superintendent is in lieu of a general manager, where the general manager would be an employee of the city, whereas the superintendent is just someone on the commission. So they wouldn't be able to come to, you know, as a deputy here to tell the report or whatever. That's something that would have to come from the city administrator itself, which is why we voted not to have the general managers, so we don't have that constant overlay of someone else coming up over here. To me, that's what I understood it as, is it makes sense to go to the city administrator as opposed to waiting for each council meeting for something to come up.
Yeah, so wouldn't the superintendent actually report to the commission? I guess that's the way, am I not understanding that correctly? Isn't that how that works?
On behalf of the commission. To the city.
Yeah, that's I can understand the hesitancy of it saying that they report to, or, let's see, what does it say?
Yeah, it says report to the city administrator is the very last. They're subject to confirmation by the city council and report to the city administrator.
Yeah, I think the intention of that was to increase communication. Go ahead, Attorney Johnson.
Sorry. As I was listening to that, so it says that the superintendent reports to the administrator. So I think there's actually two things for you to consider there. One is day-to-day, and I think that goes to what you're talking about now. The other one is who or what is responsible for doing the annual reviews and things of that nature, because that can be different people, or it can be the same.
Yeah, I think like day-to-day things, that's mostly keeping the administrator informed is what we went for, but the commission should still be in charge of reviews and things. Go ahead, Alder Motive.
My understanding of what we talked about was that the superintendent would continue with the day-to-day responsibilities. However, the superintendent not only needs to communicate with the city for coordination purposes, but also needs to have accountability for their reviews and things as well. And just like other department heads report to the city administrator, this would follow in line with that policy.
Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to figure out if we're meaning to say after subject to confirmation by the city council and like provide ongoing reports to the city administrator. Is that what we're trying to get at? Because just saying report, it sounds like they're working under the administrator, but providing reports, I think more along the line of what we mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the terminology sounds to me like he's directly working under the supervisor, under the city
He's
administrator.
not supervised by the administrator, he's just giving out reports. Clarifying that. That's what it sounds like you're trying to say.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so to clarify, it sounds like at least the majority from what I'm hearing right now would prefer the superintendent doesn't report to the administrator. The commission would still be over the superintendent, similar to how it is now. But the superintendent would be responsible for providing reports
Right.
on a regular, ongoing, and communicating.
Communicating, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was the overall intention, and maybe it just wasn't worded super well, and I can understand the confusion and hesitancy on that portion. Is that a good direction to kind of tweak that a little bit? Okay. And then, so back to the personnel manual, we didn't really resolve that, I don't think. I personally, so basically, the CWL has been operating with this personnel manual for a long time. Granted, it wasn't ever properly added, or it wasn't ever properly addressed or ratified as an addendum, whatever words you want to use. But I think it's a good opportunity to do that. It should have been a long time ago, and I think it should be now. So I think we should adopt this with it personally, but that's a decision for all of us. So what are the thoughts? Alder Reed.
Oh, thank you. So I'm also still interested in adopting the I can't say the word, addendum. Yeah, thank you. Adopting the addendum at this point. I don't think it would make that much sense to worry about mirroring the other functions of the manuals for sanitation and whatnot. I think they just will have such different needs for the possible work schedules and emergency schedules and plans than the water and light. I just don't think it'll make that much difference.
Thank you, Alder Reed.
I agree, and I also think that we still have that consultant that studies out pending, and so if there's any fine tuning that we need to do at the end of the summer or whenever that's ready, I think that could be done then.
Okay. So it seems like we're in agreement, we should adopt that along with the ordinance. Now, my next question is, do we want to review that manual and see it before we adopt it, or do we just want to assume it's good and adopt it with the ordinance now? Do we just want to add it to it and be okay with it, or do you want to see it first? Alder Motive?
I've seen it as I'm on the commission. I think it's fine. It fairly represents the labor and their compensation for their extra duties. I just would like to remind the council that once the commission gets in there, I think that the commission will need to review it as a whole to make sure that everything is properly represented for all of the different utilities.
Oh, my screen's not on, so I'm not even paying attention to anybody that's not present in the room. I apologize. Alder Rolke?
I personally would like to see it before we adopt anything. I'd like to review it.
Thank you, Alder Rolke. Mayor Arnold, did you have anything to add?
She's not on.
There she goes.
Sorry, it took a while to unmute. I agree with Alder Rolke. I would like to see it and then adopt it.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement that we would like to adopt it at the same time, but maybe review it before we do all of this. So perhaps tabling this and not moving it to the regular meeting tonight then until we have all of it together. And then we could change the wording about the reporting, providing reports to, or however, at the same time. So that's cleaned up in this too.
Right, and then the single rate payer, which I think,
Right.
whichever idea that was, that's great. I
Yeah,
think that's
Attorney
awesome.
Johnson, of course, because.
Yeah, no, I mean, because we do have a lot of business owners that would like.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we could clean up those items.
Yep.
Are there any more questions, comments, concerns, or things we'd like to change before reviewing again? Seeing none. Well, then it sounds like it's the will of the council to not move this forward to the regular meeting and put it back onto the agenda of the next committee of the whole? Or do you want it on the regular meeting and to review the manual at the regular meeting for adoption? Or we could do another special committee of the whole before the regular meeting as well.
Yeah, let's table it.
Just table it, put it back to the committee of the whole. Okay.
Oh, okay. So would we still have the option to move it to the regular meeting next time? Or will we set it up that way?
We could do a special meeting like we did again today.
Okay.
So that way, if everyone's in agreement, we could move forward.
Sounds good.
So, awesome. Is that good enough direction for everybody? All right, then if there is nothing more, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Alder Motive.
Move to adjourn.
Alder Motive will second.
I have a motion from Alder Rolke and a second from Alder Motive. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we stand adjourned. That one.
Everyone to the city council regular meeting. I'm going to step down. I'm here tonight, but barely. Some of you know that I left town after our last meeting and came back a few days later with COVID. And it's particularly bad today. So I am going to allow Council President Ian Gray to actually run tonight's meeting. I may have a little something to say during the mayor's report, but otherwise I'm going to save my voice and just participate when I need to. So I'm going to let Ian take over now. And thank you, Ian.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Mayor Arnold. I know that is not a fun position to be in. So with that, if Deputy Clerk Jane Foodie could take the roll call, please.
Arnold,
Present.
Gray,
Present.
Motive,
Present.
Reed,
Here.
Rolke,
Present.
Steiner,
Here.
Albright.
Here.
Thank you. And this meeting was, of course, properly noticed. Pledge of Allegiance, sorry. I don't typically lead this meeting. I apologize. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. All right. Again, this meeting was properly noticed. Next up is to approve the agenda. Do I have any comments or alterations? Then I will take a motion to approve the agenda.
Alder Motif will make a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item number 2.
Thank you, Alder Motive.
New business item number 2.
Yes, sorry.
Alder Steiner will second.
I have a motion from Alder Motive and a second from Alder Steiner. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. So first up, we have correspondence and communication. Pete, or sorry, we're not to that yet. Sorry, this is not the typical meeting I run, so bear with me. Yeah. Yeah, that would be typically when.
If they would like to speak during this meeting.
Yeah. Is this the meeting that you want to speak during, or did you want the cow after this, probably? Okay. Yeah. All right. Then no one is signed up for tonight. Next up is the consent agenda. Let's see here, in your packets, you have the Council and Committee of the Whole minutes, we're approving the operators licenses. Everyone should have those in front of you that Jane passed out earlier. The picnic license for the Madison Association of the Deaf, the Fireman's Park Pavilion, and then the approval of the mayoral appointment of Steve Hajewski to the Community Development Authority. If that is agreeable to everyone, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Alder Steiner will make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Reed seconds.
I have a motion from Steiner and a second from Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Moving right along to new business. Number 1 is to consider the bids for the CDBG stormwater project. Thank you, Jason. We have Jason Letha here with us tonight.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight we have a slight change from the last COW meeting. And if you've read your packet, you are aware that our low bidder, our LP Diversified, has understood that the council may be awarding the single portion of the project instead of the entire project. Their hope was that they were skilled at doing the dredging part and was going to find somebody to ultimately help them do the pipe work, but felt like they weren't the right fit if the project was solely the pipe work. So after some discussion with us, they did decide to withdraw their bid. That does result in essentially a non-qualified bid, which then bumps up the second low bidder as the new recommended low bidder. And we do know that the second low bidder is more than qualified to do the pipe work. They're a very large contractor that does specialize in that type of work. Unfortunately, the difference is that they were slightly higher. The good news is it wasn't much, $1,100 or so higher, I believe the total was. A lot of times those bids are tens of thousands of dollars difference. You do have, just so everybody knows, you do have a bid bond in place that does allow you to protect the bidding under a couple conditions, and I just wanted to make sure we clarified that because Attorney Johnson helped me with this, so I'm going to put on my attorney hat and hopefully make sense here. The bid bond can only be used if you award the project and the contractor backs out of the bid and doesn't honor it. And then if that is the case, it can only be used to account for the difference between the low bidder and the second low bidder. So the two things that don't apply here is they withdrew their bid before you would have officially awarded it, so the bid bond does not then apply. And even if you would have awarded it at the last meeting, the only real compensation you would be able to draw from would be the $1,100, which you probably would spend more time getting your $1,100 than the $1,100 is worth, honestly. So it's an unfortunate circumstance, but I do feel confident in the second low bidder. They are eager to go and start the project, so that's good news. And we look forward, obviously, to any questions from the council tonight or favorable action to move this forward. If you so choose, we do have one last step left, which, if you recall, was amending our grant, and I understand that we submitted that about 10 days ago, so we should find out if that's favorably acted upon here in the next couple days. I have not heard anything back from the state that indicated otherwise, that they would not consider or honor the amended grant to move forward with this. So everything kind of is starting to fall into place if you guys are okay with the second low bidder moving forward. So any questions on that whole weirdness? It happens to me like once every 10 years. So
right.
it is pretty rare, but we do have kind of a special situation here. But I don't think the city has a bad second contractor here, so.
Thank you so much, Jason. Go ahead, Alder Reed.
Oh, thank you. Yes, my only concern, if for some reason the state would not honor the changes we're asking for the grant, would we have any way to back out? Because it's a substantial grant that we're counting on.
I think at this point, I don't know if they could award the bid contingent upon the grant. They'd have to award it or not award it correctly.
That would be my thought.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like you're kind of at a little bit of a risk here. I certainly do know that we should know in the next couple days, but if you take action tonight, the other issue is if you table it, obviously, then we delay the project, a couple weeks. And again, it's time sensitive to get the work completed by October. So I know we were kind of already short of time with the rebid here as well. So I don't know if you had any thoughts, Kyle?
Would we be able to, between the mayor, clerk, and myself, withhold signature for those couple days? We have the approval in our pocket, but if we don't sign, that doesn't make it binding.
Right, that would make sense if we're waiting to hear, and we should hear back in a couple days. Council could move forward and just wait for signatures.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and we do ultimately, if you award it tonight, the next step for us is to issue the notice of award back to the contractor with the contracts to execute and pull the performance and payment bonds, which usually takes them a couple weeks anyways, to get that back to us before you guys actually do the signing to make the binding, contracts binding. So we do have a little window here of about 2 weeks for total turnaround time, hopefully knock on wood. So I think there would be opportunity, obviously, then to, know well in advance of the grant amendment.
Okay, and that makes me feel a little bit better about it. Alder Albright, did you have?
No, sorry.
No.
I didn't realize my light was on. No, I think we're moving forward is probably the right thing to do.
Good. Seeing, so it looks like we're all in agreement to move forward with that. Okay, perfect. Not an ideal situation, but not the worst it could be, so.
We have to make motions.
Oh, yes, sorry. I will entertain a motion.
Alder Steiner will motion to move the bid forward for Super Excavators Inc. over LP Diversified.
Okay.
Alder Rolke will second.
All right, I have a motion from Alder Steiner and a second from Alder Rolke. All in favor? Or I should probably do a roll call on that.
And also,
go ahead.
Ian, could you just clarify that that's the base bid only in the motion, just so we understand that we're not accepting the alternate? That would also be helpful.
Okay, perfect.
If
Yeah, that makes sense. So I have a motion from Alder Steiner and a second from Alder Rolke to accept the base bid of $567,029.04 from Super Excavators Incorporated. With that, if Deputy Clerk could take a roll call.
Gray,
Aye.
Modis,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Rolke,
Aye.
Steiner,
Aye.
Albright,
Aye.
Arnold. No, sorry.
Oh, yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Jason. Then, next up is to consider and take action on the claims in the amount of $352,875.55. If I don't have any questions, comments, and concerns, take a motion.
Alder Motif will make a motion to approve the claims in the amount of $352,875.55.
Alder Steiner will second.
I have a motion from Alder Motif and a second from Alder Steiner. If Deputy Clerk Jane Foodie could take a roll call again for us.
Modis,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Rolke,
Aye.
Steiner,
Aye.
Albright,
Aye.
Gray.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then next up is reports from the city administrator and the mayor. Would you like to?
All right. I just have two quick items. The planning director application period closed, and we'll be reviewing application materials this week. And the assistant administrator position, the add-on position, that's going to close at the end of this week. So we'll have more information on both of those the next time we meet.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kyle. Did you have anything that you wanted to add tonight, Mayor Arnold?
Well, I just wanted to say that I was very sorry to miss yet again another wonderful farmers market, not to mention the 4th of July celebration. I did get an email today from Amy Jo Myers about just some updates for people about what's happening in the rec department, and she wanted people to know that session 2 of swimming lessons, which starts July 12th and goes to the 22nd, still has some spots available. And then there's a session 3, which is August 1st to August 12th, and they can call her if they want to register, or they can go on the website, the MyRec website, and sign up there. And summer camp starts up again next week, and so lots going on for kids in the rec department, and that's it for me tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Arnold. Then with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Alder Rolke will move to adjourn.
Alder Steiner will second.
I have a motion from Alder Rolke and a second from Alder Steiner. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we stand adjourned. Let's see here. Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. I have 7:19 p.m. and I'd like to welcome everyone to the Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole. With that, if Deputy Clerk Jane Pudi could take a roll call.
Reed,
Here.
Rolke,
Present.
Steiner,
Here.
Albright,
Here.
Arnold,
Present.
Gray,
Present.
Motive.
Present.
Thank you. This meeting was properly noticed, so next up is to approve the agenda.
Alder Motive will make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Alder Steiner will second.
I have a motion from Alder Motive and a second from Alder Steiner. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, the agenda is approved. Next up is citizen comments, and we do have Pete Skalitsky signed up for tonight. See, I got one thing right during our meeting so far, so.
Perfect. Pete Skalitsky, 346 Sturgis Street. See, I did mine just correct this time too. Really don't have any additional things to say. I'm here in support of the ATVU TV ordinance that you guys have. Thank you very much for creating a draft to look at. I've sent each of you emails with the changes that we'd like to see and improvements, so it makes it a little bit easier to understand and easier for, obviously, the police and force to be able to enforce it if they have any issues as well. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. Was there anyone else present that wished to speak that didn't get a chance to sign up? Go ahead, sir.
Second button from the left.
Oh, it's already on. You're good.
Aaron Lyons, I'm at 941 Park Avenue. So I'm actually in opposition of the ATV UTV routes in the ordinance. I'm actually a pretty introverted person, so coming here and speaking about this, it's a pretty big deal in my opinion. I was not here for the June 21st meeting to speak there. I unfortunately had other commitments. And so I had drafted a letter, which I had sent to each of you and Mayor Arnold and Administrator, about some of the concerns that I feel either were overlooked based on the materials that were presented at that meeting or were maybe misleading in their presentation. So the first one I want to address was public safety. I'm a runner, if you can't tell. I'm running 50 to 60 miles a week throughout our city, and that's on non-peak training. I can get anywhere up to 90 or 100 miles. So I put a lot of distance on our sidewalks, our streets, and at least once a week, I have someone almost hit me with a car. So just looking at human behavior, whether you're in a UTV, ATV, or a car, that person's not going to change their human behavior. Sorry, just going back to my notes here. And I'm just one person. I see a lot of other people out running and walking around, walking dogs, just walking for the sake of walking, or like me, maybe they're training for a race, or whatever. They just like to get out and run or go for a walk, or bike for that matter. And so I even have some instances here to share. So June 23rd, I was running along Highway 73, right by Avalon Road on the southwest side of town. And it's light out, and I had a car that decided to cross 73 to go to Highland Ridge, and I was in the middle of the crosswalk, and they just decided that they wanted to cross when I was in the middle of the crosswalk, and they had to slam on their brakes in the middle of the street. That's an instance where whether they're in an ATV or UTV or a car, that human behavior is not going to change. They just aren't looking where they're going. They're not paying attention. Maybe they're looking for other cars, but they're not looking for pedestrians. An ATV, UTV is not going to cause a lot of damage to another car or the people in that car, but they could cause a lot of damage to someone that's biking, running, walking. And then a week later, actually, on June 28th, I was running along Dick Street, and a person came speeding out of the drive-thru at Taco Bell. Didn't even look up. He was on his phone. He saw me at the last minute, and at that minute, I could reach out and put my hand on his car. And, you know, these are just some instances that, I mean, these happen at least once a week. And so whether they're, like I said, whether they're in a car or ATV, it's human behavior. It's not going to change. And as a municipality, we really should be risk adverse, not looking to favor adding more risk. Even though it may not be a liability to the city, it's still a risk to the citizens, the residents of this city. And so some of the information that was provided in the meeting packet for the June 21st that I'd seen had referenced some accidents. Well, that was actually misleading. Those were only fatalities, and that did not account for crashes or injuries, which were significantly higher. So I suspect what happened is that the DNR actually publishes two reports. One is just fatalities, and then another report is all accidents and crashes, fatalities that are in snowmobiles, boats, UTVs, ATVs. So total crashes for 2021 was 292, and total injuries from those crashes was 311. Now, there's actually a graph, and I realize that my letter is probably not in your city council packets, and so you can't see the graph. But over the past 10 years, that has actually been an upward trend. And so now I realize that in discussions I've had with other people on Facebook that, you know, there's the argument that, oh, you know, it won't really be that much of an impact because there won't be a lot of traffic. Well, if there's not a lot of traffic, then why are you pushing so hard to actually have this ordinance if it's not going to have any impact to begin with? And that there's also been some arguments I've seen regarding comparing one city to another. So one person I was discussing with is actually an alderman for Waterloo. And I think it's inappropriate to compare us to Waterloo because you can't just compare two cities because they're the same size. You also have to look at how many people within those cities own UTVs. We may have a much higher UTV ownership population here than Waterloo does. So Waterloo may not see as much risk or potential risk from accidents occurring from ATVs, UTVs, is what we may because we have a higher ownership population. Now, that data is just not available. The DNR doesn't compile that data. As far as I could find, no agency in the state compiles that data. They only track it on a state level basis. And so also then it kind of comes down to my second point that I highlighted in the letter was business impact. Now, I am a business appraiser. I valued thousands of businesses over the past 10 years. The business impact from these kinds of things is negligible. Most businesses, which is gas stations and restaurants that benefit from this type of action, they're not going to see a dramatic increase in revenue from something like this. They are going to see a dramatic increase in revenue from large-scale events like our 4th of July festival, the farmers market, those things. They're not going to see a dramatic increase in revenue from, you know, maybe a handful of people coming through town every once a month or maybe twice a month. And that's just revenue. That's not kind of for profitability. And then even with gas stations, which is generally going to be your other business that sees an increase from, or potential increase, I agree that, you know, whether they're driving through with their ATV, UTV on a trailer, or if they're going out to some other route, or if they're actually, say we have an ordinance and they're driving through, they got to get gas. I mean, whether they're heading out, they're still going to stop at a gas station, even if it's on the back of their trailer. And so in my opinion, you're not going to see a big increase from gas station revenue just from people getting gas. And then my third point was there's, I think, a loud minority that are fighting for this and a silent majority that are against it. There was a poll that was conducted on Facebook that indicated 248 people in favor and 50 not in favor. And it was broken down into aware of ordinance, not aware of ordinance, aware of ordinance request, not aware of ordinance request, and then between in favor and not in favor. And so it indicated also between resident and non-resident. And so I want to highlight that this is really not a poll that anyone should rely on for anything. This has no basis in any statistical methodology that's accepted by pretty much anyone that does data analytics. It's given the size of the Facebook group as well as the number of people that we have living in this city and the difficulty of knowing how many people in that Facebook group actually still live in this city, that the sample size that was used in this poll, you can't extrapolate the opinion of the entire city from this one poll. I suggest that if you really wish to continue further conversations about the ordinance, that you should have more public forums and should have more awareness regarding the ordinance to gain a better understanding of who is in favor and not in favor, as well as making sure that all citizens are aware of the various public safety issues that may become, may become a factor with the passage of this ordinance. And in addition, I also would like to note that that poll included many non-residents who I would argue should not be considered in the creation of an ordinance, or if the people are in favor or not in favor, because as city council members, you are responsible to your district and your constituents, and those residents may believe what's best for them, but what's best for the city may not be what's best for, or what's best for people outside the city may not be what's best for people living in the city. And so that was kind of a summation of the letter that I had written and emailed to all of you earlier today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Was there anyone else that wished to speak tonight? All right. Then with that, we will move on to item number 5, which is the committee and commission minutes. In your packets, you have the minutes from the CWL, the library, and the tourism. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, we'll move right on to review the CSA donation for the proposal of Diamond 1 dugout wrap for the Cardinal Pride at Meister Park. Do you want to give us any info on that, Amy, or?
I can, sure.
I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but
Yeah, it is. I mean, everything is, I just put a
right. That's fine. Did anyone have any questions for Amy, I suppose is the better? Is everyone okay with moving this forward?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for steadied up briefly, Amy. Next up is to review the preliminary funding plans for debt issuances. And we have our representative from Ellers. So, and he's going to be up there for a hot minute because there's a few items.
Good evening, Greg Johnson from Ellers. Pleasure to be here this evening. So I'm going to speak to really 2 debt issuances that are on your agenda this evening. So first, I'm going to start with the general obligation corporate purpose bonds, the 2000B issue, since 2022B, excuse me, since that's what's kind of first on your committee of the whole agenda. I'm going to speak through the pre-sale report that we'd included that kind of summarizes the financial analysis and the purpose for these bonds. So the general obligation corporate purpose bonds finance projects in the city's 2022 and 2023 capital improvement project consists of 3 types of projects. Street improvements, Highway 89 improvements, some funds for anticipated 2023 street improvements. The second type of project is a fire truck acquisition, and the third type of project is storm sewer improvements on Fuller Street to Washington Park. So the total amount of project costs being funded is $1,300,000. You're funding all 3 types of these projects with one issuance of general obligation corporate purpose bonds. You'll notice on the agenda, there are multiple resolutions related to this one bond issue. So under state law, if you're financing several different types of projects with one bond issue, you also have to adopt separate resolutions that identify what types of projects you're funding with that bond issue. So again, the purposes are streets, fire, under statute it says sewerage, but in this case it's storm sewer projects. And then there's a resolution that identifies the total amount that you're borrowing. So it's one bond issue kind of broken up into three parts. So the list of the projects was identified in Table 2 of our analysis, if you want to refer to that. But in terms of the fiscal impact, I want to start with kind of the city's existing debt profile and what you're presently levying for debt service. So in the pre-sale report for the GO bond issue, there's a Table 1, which is labeled Existing General Obligation Debt Base Case. That is really the overview of your existing levy for debt service. So in the far left-hand column is these total principal and interest payments that the city makes for existing general obligation debt outstanding. There's other expenses that are funded through your debt service budget. Those are accounted for as well. And then the city budgets several other revenue sources in addition to the property tax levy to repay debt service. So those primary revenue sources are revenue from your tax and criminal finance districts, and then there's portions of your existing GO debt that's paid by sewer revenues. And then there's special assessment income that the city budgets annually to make debt service payments, and then just some investment income that's attributed to your debt service fund as well. So your levy for debt service in your 2022 budget was about $804,000. So we're going to look at how that will change once we factor in the proposed bonds that you're considering here for 2022 and 2023 capital projects. So I mentioned the capital projects were on Table 2 for this bond issue. On Table 3, we have these sources and uses. So we identify the amount that's being funded for streets. So again, it's 1.3 million, 800,000 is for streets, 350,000 is for fire, 150,000 is for stormwater projects. We've identified the cost of issuance and split those proportionally between those three project types. So the total amount that you're authorizing is $1,370,000. 840,000 is for streets, 370,000 is for fire, and 160,000 is for stormwater. In Table 4 is the estimated debt service payments for these bonds. So we're estimating interest rates. We factored in a healthy increase over where present rates are presently within the market. Rates have gone up significantly since the beginning of the year. They've started to kind of plateau a little bit here lately, but still kind of want to be conservative and factor in a healthy increase. We factored in about an 85 basis point cushion. 1 basis point is 0.01%. So we've allocated the debt by the three types of projects that you're financing: streets, fire, and stormwater. But the entire amount of the principal and interest that's due on these bonds annually will be repaid entirely by the property tax levy. So in Table 5 is where we show the impact of this proposed bond issue and your existing debt. So under the existing debt column, that's what all came forward from Table 1. That's your existing property tax levy for debt service. And then we show the 2022 GO bonds, and then how that projected levy will change for existing and proposed debt. So it's anticipated that these bonds will result in the debt service levy increasing by about $78,000 from 2022 to 2023. Then, we show the levy kind of remaining stable, but that leaves room for other capital projects, that the city may choose to finance in the future. So finally, in terms of kind of the fiscal analysis for the GO bonds, there's a limit to the amount of general obligation debt that the city can have outstanding, the principal amount. The total of your existing general obligation debt plus the principal of these proposed bonds cannot exceed 5% of the city's total equalized valuation. So by the end of this year, we're projecting that 5% of the city's total equalized value will result in a borrowing limit of about $25.8 million. With your existing debt and these bonds, the total amount of principal you have outstanding will be approximately $9.2 million. So you're at about 36% of your debt limit. That leaves $16.6 million for future capacity. So it's a healthy margin, gives you some flexibility for future capital projects. So not adding too much to your direct debt burden in terms of providing flexibility for future capital projects. So there's, again, several resolutions on the agenda that, again, identify how much you're financing for each type of project, a resolution that identifies the total amount that are being financed through these bonds. And then for general obligation debt, it's only applicable to this issue. Statutes require that you publish a notice to electors. So if this is approved by the Common Council at your meeting in 2 weeks, that notice to electors will need to be published. So in terms of kind of the process, where we're at today and kind of where we're going, in terms of kind of the debt issuance process, this is the beginning of the discussion, really just for informational purposes here at the Committee of the Whole. If it's your preference, these will be forwarded on for a Common Council consideration in 2 weeks, so the same resolutions. That's kind of the official legal start to the debt issuance process once the Common Council acts. We'll go through the debt issuance process, work with city staff to get the offering documents and do all the work that's done in preparation for the bond sale. And then the bond sale will occur at your first meeting in September on the 6th. We put the bonds out for bid, just like you would for a public works project, and recommend that the bid be awarded to the bank or underwriter that submits the lowest true interest cost. And then we estimate the closing date will be September 22nd. That's the date the city will have the funds wired to them upon successful award of the bond issue. So that's an overview of the GO bond issue. I'll pause. I'm happy to answer questions before we talk about the next part of the financing plan, which is the sewer revenue bonds.
Thank you so much, Greg. Did anyone have any questions on the GO bond issuance?
Oh, a ton, but I don't even know where to start. Kyle, if we have questions, we can forward them to you to forward to Ellers?
Yes.
Okay. All right, then I suppose if you would like to move on.
Sure. So next I'll speak to the sewer system revenue bonds. So this is revenue bonds, which the main distinction between revenue debt and general obligation debt is that revenue debt pledges a non-tax levy revenue source to repay the bonds. So in this instance, you're pledging revenues from the sewer utilities, since this is funding sewer projects, to repay this debt service. The other main advantage of revenue bonds is that, as I just mentioned, there's a limit on general obligation debt principal outstanding under statute. No such limit exists for revenue bonds, so you can issue as legally as much as you're comfortable repaying, so there's no limit. So that's the primary reason why revenue bonds are also been used historically by the city to preserve that general obligation borrowing capacity for other types of projects. So in terms of the projects that are being funded by the sewer revenue bonds, those can be found in Table 1. Consist of projects anticipated to be completed yet this year and then into 2023. So we have the sewer portion of the improvements for Highway 89, some sewer improvements related to other street work in 2023, some lift station improvements, and clarifier deck improvements. So the total amount of project costs being funded is $2,270,000. On Table 2 is the sources and uses. We identify, the amount that you're funding plus the issuance expenses. One of the other main distinctions between revenue bonds and general obligation debt is the requirement of what's called a debt service reserve fund. So the city has that in place now for existing sewer revenue bonds outstanding. So what that is, it's essentially a contingency amount. It's the amount that the city is required to set aside that in the event the sewer revenues annually are not sufficient to repay the debt service, you draw on that debt service reserve fund to make the principal and interest payments, and then you're required to replenish that debt service reserve as soon as practical. So the city historically has never had to rely on those debt service reserve amounts, but you are required to have that as part of a revenue bond issue. So that's part of the bond issue that's being issued. So the total amount is the $2,650,000. For the estimated interest rates, here we've estimated the debt service schedule in Table 3. We've kind of structured the principal and interest payments around some of the existing debt of the sewer utility. So you'll see this is a 20-year debt issuance, so we have the estimated interest rates and the estimated amortization schedule. Same cushion built into that we did for the general obligation issue as well. One of the other financial requirements that has to be satisfied to issue revenue bonds is what's called the debt service coverage requirement. So you have to meet this requirement annually for existing debt, and anytime the city issues new revenue bonds, you have to demonstrate compliance with this test as well, and that is summarized in Table 4. So the sewer utility repays some existing general obligation debt, has some existing revenue debt outstanding, that's summarized in the first two columns, and then under the proposed revenue bonds in Table 4 is the principal and interest on these proposed bonds. So we've done two calculations. The first is the all-in debt coverage. There's no legal requirement here that you need to demonstrate compliance with on an annual basis, but we think it's instructive in terms of how your existing sewer utilities are positioned to handle existing debt and proposed debt. So we take all of the revenues of the sewer utility, back out all of your operational expenses, and we arrive at a net revenue amount. And we compare that net revenue amount to the annual debt service payments. So that all-in coverage calculation looks at general obligation debt repaid by the sewer utility and revenue bonds repaid by the sewer utility. You'd like to see that ratio be higher than 1.0. So, over the next couple of years, it's slightly over 1.0. That's based on your 2020 audit. We're going to rerun these calculations when we get your draft 2021 audit here in the near future. In the far right-hand column, this is the legal requirement that has to be met annually and every time revenue bonds are sold. So that just looks at the revenue debt that's outstanding, excludes general obligation. Same calculation, take the operating revenues of the sewer utility, subtract out your operational expenses, and that ratio needs to be 1.25 or greater for existing and proposed revenue bonds. So based on your 2020 audit, we're kind of right at that minimum threshold over the next couple of years. So we'll need to, again, take a close look at that when you get your draft 2021 audit, just to make sure we're still in compliance with that revenue debt coverage. So we legally meet the requirements to sell the bonds. The coverage is tight. So kind of indicates kind of continuing monitoring of sewer rates going forward certainly is going to be necessary to support, future capital investment for the sewer utility. So there's only one resolution related to the sewer revenue bonds, just to kind of authorize the issuance of these bonds. The process is identical to what we'll be doing on the general obligation side. First step is this evening, just kind of review and discussion. If you choose, go to Common Council in 2 weeks. That legally starts the process. We'll sell the bonds at the first meeting in September. Closing will occur before the end of September in receipt of funds. So that's the overview of the sewer revenue bonds.
Thank you very much, Greg. Did anyone have any questions on the sewer revenue bonds? Seeing none, is everyone comfortable moving forward the 4 resolutions to the regular meeting?
I am.
See nodding heads at home as well. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. That was very detailed. I think probably more detailed than I've heard it in the past, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I do too.
Then next up on the agenda is, skipping down to item number 14, is to review the draft ordinance regarding the recreational use of ATVs and UTVs in the city streets. So of course, we have discussed this on multiple occasions before you. Let me clear out some room here. You have the draft ordinance that Attorney Johnson helped prepare. Did you have something you want to start with, Attorney Johnson, or just there for questions?
Pretty much just here for questions. I guess the only thing that I would say up front is what you have is the starting point for your conversation is the draft that I have done most recently for a municipality. There are several provisions in here that everybody likes to play with. So all of this is up to you as to how you want to do things. The common areas that people or that municipalities adjust is your routes. Obviously, the single most important well, aside from whether you're going to do this or not, your routes are the next most important questions. At the bottom of the first page, some municipalities like to put hours of operation in play, others do not. One municipality I know has a spring and summer and fall only, and not in the winter. That was a new one to me, but it's been done. And then the other one that has been a big issue lately is helmets. At what age? Statute requires under 18 for helmets, and I have one municipality that said everybody has a helmet, period. So those are kind of been the hot button items of late, and then I'm just going to step back, and if there's questions, I'll answer them.
Thank you much, Attorney Johnson. Go ahead, Alder.
One thing that was brought to our attention was section 98317, operation your roadways, section D. Can I get a little clarification as to what that means?
Yes, certainly. So you may think that there is a contradiction between section A and section D, and I don't think that there is, but your specific reference to section D, the statute regarding ATV, UTV usage on public roadways is different from snowmobiles. With ATV, UTV, you are not allowed to leave your driveway and drive down the street in order to get to a route. With a snowmobile, you can do that. So, which is one of the reasons why most of the clubs and a lot of municipalities just designate all of the public streets as routes. Then you legally can leave your driveway. You're immediately on the route because you're on a public street. But that is a difference between snowmobiles and ATV, UTV usage. I like to leave that language in D. If you decide to designate all city streets as routes, then it's redundant. But I like to leave it in there anyway, just because in the future you may decide to restrict a couple streets based on it as you go forward. So then the language is already in there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Attorney Johnson. Alder's motive?
Oh, sorry.
I had made this suggestion at the last council meeting, and I'm going to make the suggestion again. I don't think we are being fair to our residents. I don't think the few polls that have been made are allowing all voters to put their input in. And I am recommending a simple advisory referendum at the next voting session. I am not recommending that we put forth a full ordinance. I'm recommending that we ask our citizens simply, do you wish to have the use of ATVs, UTVs on our roadways? And I would ask that you all consider the advisory referendum.
Thank you, Alder Motive. And honestly, since this has come to play, I have heard from an overwhelming amount of people that are against it as opposed to for it, personally. The majority of people I've heard from that are for it are not my constituents, but I've heard from it's up to almost 10 times more of my constituents that are against it. So I personally cannot support this. Would be voting against my constituents to support this. The best I could agree to would be a referendum for us to all see that clearly. Similar to what Aaron mentioned earlier, I think we're hearing from a loud minority, not our actual constituents.
I would say to that is this comes to a discussion of personal responsibility to public responsibility. Is it our job to make sure that people can't do certain things, or is it our job to put up guidelines as to do them safely? When I look at the incidences that Mr. Lyons said and different things that are going on, it's usually due to somebody misusing the device itself. So if a kid who isn't using a helmet is operating it improperly, that's a very big risk. we have restrictions for that. If an individual like Mr. Skalitsky is driving it perfectly safe and fine, you usually don't have issues. There's always going to be an issue of danger and liability for any situation we put forth. We allow alcohol to be served in the city, but there's a danger that you're going to have people driving drunk, even though there's laws against it. This is the same situation where you're creating a law that basically allows people to do things, but with restrictions. And it's up to the individuals there that own these devices and want to use them to be responsible with them. And that's why I think it's really shouldn't be much more of an ordeal than that, because if people are responsible, you're not going to have the issues. If people are irresponsible, that's where you're going to come into the issues.
And that's a great philosophical thought. Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. I also simply cannot support the ordinance. I truly do not want to be an impediment to the fun of citizens, but I really have to follow safety of the public first and foremost. I have 5 neighbors that abut my property. 3 of the 5 own ATVs, UTVs. One of them is responsible trailers at places, and the other 2 are ripping around their yards pretty often. One of them got a little bit into my yard this evening while I was leaving to come here. I just haven't seen enough responsibility with my eyes to feel comfortable that we wouldn't be opening Pandora's box. I know that the club members are responsible adults. It's not them. It's just that I know it's going to be citizens of various ages just tooling around and having fun on the streets. And I just know that it's going to result in tragedies.
Thank you, Alder Reed. Mayor Arnold?
Am I muted? First of all, yeah, I agree. We've got some very passionate people, excuse me, on both sides of the issue. I'm going to have to come back. I can't talk, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. Just chime in whenever you're ready. Go ahead, Albright.
So I agree with Adam. I don't think we can legislate people need to be safe and they need to obey the rules. And I am not in favor of doing a referendum. I'm just in favor of moving forward with the ordinance that we discussed last week, or last meeting. I did have one thing though. I didn't see a sunset clause. So
in the referendum, we were able to repeal it at any time. It was how it's written currently.
the ordinance? The ordinance.
There are 2, the ordinance as presently drafted says that it can be amended or repealed at any time by the council, just like any other ordinance can. I did not put any effective date in, and I did not put a sunset clause in because I wasn't sure where to start. Many of the municipalities that I've written these ordinances for do use a sunset clause. Some are 1 year, 2, 5. Those are the kind of your standards. And you certainly can put a sunset clause in. The key to that is to make sure that between all of us in this room, somebody remembers that it's coming up, which is always a little bit tricky. The effective date issue, a lot of the towns that I have written these ordinances for are all in favor of the ordinance itself, but the cost of the signs is very expensive. And so what the towns have been doing lately is adopting the ordinance and making it effective upon somebody, something, some group coming forward and saying, here's the money for the signs, and then taking the steps to get the signs posted. At the last meeting, you had the club members, I believe, offered to take care of the signs, so I didn't put that part of the language in, although it probably should be, and that the ordinance would be effective after all the signage is posted.
Right. Thank you. Alder Rolke?
I agree with Shelley and Adam. I just think that if where you're coming from is legislating safety, all you're going to wind up doing is taking away more and more and more rights of people in the town. People can get hit walking through town. People can get hit biking through town. People can die because they fell off their skateboard in town. All of those things can happen. And where do you draw the line where individual responsibility and assumption of risk has to be what people are willing to take on? You can't take everybody's rights away just to keep people safe.
To go forward with this ordinance, this is not removing any rights because these rights do not exist. This is not canceling anything. This is not harming any existing rights. This is a consideration of whether or not we should allow recreational vehicles on our roads that are intended for public transit at the potential risk of all of our citizens. This has nothing to do with rights of anyone. Go ahead, Mayor Arnold. Oh, you're muted, Mayor Arnold.
There we go. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing, and so I would just like some clarification. If we did decide to put this to a referendum, an advisory referendum, would that mean that we would not then move forward with the ordinance?
That's correct. We would be waiting until we heard back from our constituents on whether or not they supported it, would be the reason to do a referendum.
In that case, I guess I too have been hearing from people who are quite concerned, and it's not just the safety. Some of it is the noise and the disruption in their neighborhood. And, you know, it's true that we do allow people to drink alcohol, but I don't have too many people who imbibe too much, you know, walking by my house, making a lot of noise. So I do think there is a difference. You know, of course I'm concerned about the safety issue, but I think for me the big thing is, do we have the majority of people in Columbus behind this kind of proposal? And I'm not convinced that we do. I think we have a very passionate group of people who want to see it passed, who have been, you know, very eloquent, and I appreciate the information I've gotten from them. I am also hearing, though, that we have another rather large group of people who are opposed, and I don't feel comfortable developing an ordinance until I know where people in town are really at with this. And so I would support the idea of going to referendum before we decide that we're gonna pass an ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. And so I think where we're at right now is the seven of us could argue about this back and forth all night. Alder Motive brought up the referendum. Why don't we, so let's parcel this out instead of going back and forth. Why don't we, how many people are in support of holding off on the ordinance and going to a referendum, an advisory referendum?
I would.
I am.
And so is Mayor Arnold. And I will also, well, go ahead and.
Well, I just wanted to make a statement to the helmet usage in the ordinance. I would put it to the standard which you have for the state code, but for ATV use, it should be helmets and all safety gear, because those are open vehicles and they're a little bit more difficult to manage as opposed to a UTV, which has a whole encaged on it. So everyone should be wearing helmets on those, as well as all the appropriate safety gear with that as well. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Alder Steiner. And would you support a referendum?
I guess it'd be all right, yeah. We like to hear from everyone.
Okay, thank you. So that is the majority of council would support a referendum. So we will table this. And does anyone have No, sir, this isn't public comment. Does anyone have a recommendation for how the referendum should be worded? My thought is it should be super, super basic.
Simple. Just see if our citizens support it. Do you support ATV use in this city of Columbus on our roadways? We could add a second question. I don't know. I think the council needs to discuss it. That says, should it be restricted routes or open roads in the whole city? And then after we get feedback on that referendum at that time, then we can go back and see if we need to put in stronger safety regulations into our ordinance, is my thought process.
I would personally be more apt to just one simple question. I think if we ask multiple questions, it's more sounding like we are doing this. Do you want it on all streets or only some streets? And that could be confusing for residents, and then we might have people voting for something that they don't understand. I think one simple question is the logical way forward, and the routes that it is, if the constituents support it, I think what routes would be up to, that would be a better decision for council than anything anyway. So I think a simple, do you support the use of ATVs and UTVs on all city streets within the confines of the city of Columbus? Something just basic that spells it out would be my suggestion.
Could we ask for language to be brought back to another COW for us all to approve the language for the referendum?
I think so.
It would seem to me that probably the best way to do that is for your next committee of the whole meeting, two things. Number one, proposed language, and number two, to check with Clerk Gable and Deputy Clerk Fude and figure out what the timeline is, because I have a feeling you might be getting pretty close.
It's getting rushed to get it on the spring ballot.
Well, the good news is that you have August is, I'm sure you're past August.
Right.
So you have November coming up.
Oh, November,
I think,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So November will be the next election that you'll be shooting for.
Okay, that makes sense. Is that good enough direction for the city staff? Awesome. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Then next up, let me reorganize here for a second. Item number 15 is to review and discuss the CDA request to develop the ARPA plans. Actually, if Alder Motif, if you wanted to give us.
So I'm chair of the Community Development Authority, and in our last meeting, we prepared the letter that is in front of you. And essentially what we are asking is if we could vet what we feel would be a good use or even a couple of good uses of the ARPA funding that we have for the city. And we feel that we are a good committee to go ahead and present this information or recommendations, excuse me, as our focus is economic development and community development. And that is exactly what the intent of these funds are to be used for. We received approximately $535,903 in ARPA funding that needs to be used by December 31st, 2024. There are quite a few specific guidelines on items it cannot be used for. For instance, the city can't create a savings account. We can't fill in pension shortfalls or anything like that. But there are very specific uses we can use it for that are in line with economic development and community development. So all we are asking of the council is for permission to go ahead and vet potential options for us to bring back for ratification.
Thank you very much. Alder Motif? Alder Reed?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to double check to understand. So we are not giving permission or a guarantee that the CDA would be allowed to use these funds. We're simply giving them permission to come up with a plan and then check with us, and then we would decide whether or not we would approve.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. The council would
Okay,
still
thank you.
decide how the funds are used in the end. But I think it could be a good idea to have the CDA give us some ideas, you know, that have the group there to help us out. Go ahead.
So I just had a quick question. So I think I asked you this before, Kyle, but part of that ARPA money could be used to make the city whole if you've lost money anywhere by either by whatever, loss of business, and let's, for example, rentals for the park or whatever. Do you know of, is there any money that maybe off the top should be brought back to the city for loss of revenue?
The loss of revenue, they actually made it fairly easy to claim that as a really broad category. So I think we could take nearly all of the money and kind of shield it under the lost revenue, the standard allowance. What you wouldn't have is the back end economic development or investment in the community. And I think that's the key to the funds, hopefully being used in a way that makes like a long-term difference in the community, creates some development on its own and pays dividends for the longer term. But under the standard allowance, you could use it for very routine expenses.
So that's where I'm going with this. I mean, I don't think because the city was shut down because of COVID, I don't really think the taxpayers should be on the hook for that. So that's why I'm asking, and I'm saying, is it $10,000? Is it, you know, was it more excessive, like, you know, $50,000? I'm just trying to understand if you have a number in your head that the city could be reimbursed for first.
We could look at any of our, I guess, the 4 fee services. The pool is subsidized by the tax levy. So if we could document that there was a shortfall there, we could take money from this and give it to the pool. We could do that for a lot of those types of things. If the pavilion, obviously the rentals, we were shut down for rentals for quite a while. And that's subsidized, I think, by the tax levy as well. We could bring that money back in and consider it. You know, I think the question then at the end of the day is for what benefit? Because the city's subsidizing the pool, and subsidizing the pavilion and things like that. If we take this money and just kind of put it in to offset something, will we really see the benefit of that in 5 years or 10 years? And that's a policy question for the council to answer.
Thank you. Is everyone in favor of the CDA coming up with some ideas and helping guide us potentially on how we could spend the money?
Yes.
How about Alder Roelke, Mayor Arnold? Would you be in favor of that? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then we will move forward with that. Thank you, Alder Motive.
Thank you.
And of course, I moved stuff around again. What did I do? Can I see your agenda quick? I don't know where I put mine. All right. Okay. Review and discuss the DPW organizational change. If you'd like to head that off for us, Kyle.
Sure. So this is, again, relating back to the organizational study. One of the recommendations was that we kind of tweak the position from crew leader to be a street superintendent, change the duties slightly, and the goal there is that this position is out in the field, really helping direct the staff and freeing up the director to do more of the director's work. So this is kind of accomplishing that. There was a recommendation to make it salaried based on the desire to really keep this a working position in the field. We think hourly is actually a better way to compensate this position because we're not sure it would qualify under the FLSA exemptions. And on top of that, when they're working additional hours, I think they're going to expect to receive additional compensation, which obviously doesn't happen in the salaried setup. So other than that, this is sort of one of the first steps at, you know, kind of taking a lot of those recommendations and implementing them.
Thank you, Kyle. Did anyone have any thoughts or comments or anything on it?
I
Go ahead, Alder Motive.
I think it makes sense to move these job descriptions forward. However, my question is, does this change or remove anything from the DPW director's job description, and does that need to be changed?
I don't think there would be anything substantial removed from the director's job description at this point. I think a lot of it falls under the umbrella of assigning work, monitoring work, things like that. And the director will still have, the general oversight for all the operations. But this position would take more of hopefully a forefront, I think, in, taking the direction from the director and then sort of transitioning it out in the field and making sure that everything is happening as expected. And, kind of being the person out in the field checking on everything on a very routine basis and reporting back to the director so that there's a line of communication about from the director to the field what's going on without him having to be the director in every place at once.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments? Did you have anything you wanted to add, Jerry, or is that a good summary for you too?
No, I think Kyle summed it up very well. It's a good step in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
The only other thing is I think we'd like, with permission of the council or the committee of the whole, if you're comfortable, we would like to start advertising with this draft job description, assuming that it would be approved in 2 weeks. That gives us 2 weeks head start on getting someone hopefully recruited.
That makes sense. We could definitely use the help right away. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Seeing nodding heads. Okay, good. Thank you. We'll move that forward. Then next up is to review and discuss the Hillside Cemetery Secretary job description.
So unfortunately, the Hillside Cemetery Secretary Treasurer position is currently vacant due to the death of Gloria. So when we looked back at the actual job description, there really wasn't one. The Hillside Cemetery Association had their own rules that they follow as a member of that board. But as far as the city duties and the city positions, there really wasn't a whole lot of documentation. So we created the description that captured, again, the city side of the operations. And the one unique thing of this is that they're going to have, as a board member elected by the Hillside Cemetery Association, this position has duties and obligations to that organization, but that's independent of their city work. And the important point there is that if the Hillside Cemetery Board directs this person to do 20 hours of work for the association, the city shouldn't be on the hook for unlimited amount of hours that are to the association, because they're an independent group that elects their own membership from basically lot owners. So this would make it more clear that this position reports to the Director of Public Works and is responsible for these duties and can be evaluated based on those duties.
Thank you. Alder Rolke?
Yeah, I am kind of interested because it was vague to me, or maybe non-existent here when it was talking about the work environment. It just said the hours of work are flexible in nature and set by the needs of the position. I'm wondering if there's a range that we are looking at here, because I think $100 per week could be very generous if we're looking at 2 hours a week, or it could be pretty stingy if we're looking at 10. So I'd like more information about that, please.
I think the position was previously paid either 6 1/4 or 6 3/4 hours at a lower rate, but then they also received a stipend monthly for incidentals and office supplies. So we raised it basically to accommodate both things, and I think 6 hours might be not a bad amount of time. It's obviously dependent on the amount of burials that are happening and things like that, but there is a fair amount of work involved in the filing of things, and I'm sure, based on the work that Jerry and the other crew are putting in the cemetery, I'm pretty confident that there's enough work to fill up that 6 hours a week.
Right. And that was my only fear from our last Hillside Cemetery meeting was most of them were pretty certain that she put in a lot more than that amount of time is my biggest fear of maybe $100 a week isn't enough as opposed to it being too much.
May I ask a
Go ahead, automotive.
So to be clear, is this on the city payroll?
This position is on the city payroll.
Then, as per FLSA, and I encourage getting back up on this, this needs to be a hourly position. You cannot pay a stipend or flat amount as per FLSA guidelines for something like this. You can pay additional stipend money if there is a non-accountable reimbursement plan. If the city has an accountable reimbursement plan, then it needs to be paid out as an expense reimbursement as opposed to the stipend. So I strongly suggest that this position description gets changed so that it is in accordance with FLSA.
The council could do that right now. If they pick a salary, pick an hourly rate, we can have that and start advertising for it.
I have no idea what that rate should be.
My recommendation is minimum wage. What the current minimum wage is, or slightly higher?
I believe the position previously was in the $12.65 or something like that. I could get the specific. There was no one on the Hillside Cemetery Association interested in doing this work, so you're going to have to be recruiting someone from either on the membership of the association, because that's one of the requirements to serve in this position, or someone that can come in and become a member by buying a lot. So a minimum wage would be difficult, I think.
So could we recommend the $12.65 match that was there before? Or do you feel like we should go slightly higher?
I think slightly higher would be better because you're a limited number of hours, but a lot of responsibility.
Sure.
So I came up with $16.66 if you want to do it 6 hours at $100 a week.
Yeah, I think it was previously the $25 stipend and then somewhere in the $80 range. So this was a combination, but whatever the council feels like. The cemetery operates at a loss with a city subsidy. So the money's not in the budget currently to fund this position, and so it would have to be taken from other expenses, but we do have a short gap here in the compensation, so we can likely cover it through the rest of the year, but whatever dollar amount you choose, it's going to basically most likely come from an increased contribution from the city at budget time.
Right.
Would we recommend the
Yeah.
16.66?
Go ahead,
I was
Aldereen.
next, thank you. I would suggest $18 an hour for up to 10 hours a week. I mean, wage rates have been going up like crazy. This position has responsibility. I definitely want it to be, paying a little more than, fast food.
Right. I was going to suggest the same thing. Do we have a minimum wage that we start employees at with the city?
No.
Just the federal minimum wage.
Oh, okay, I didn't.
I mean, we don't hire anyone at that, but I mean, that's, there's no minimum by ordinance or something like that.
Okay.
All right,
16,
so
18 makes sense to me.
please
for
wait
administrative
to,
work.
you haven't been recognized, Alder Albright.
I would agree with that.
Thank you. Any thoughts on that, Mayor Arnold?
That sounds good to me too, sure.
Perfect. So a range of $16 to $18 is what we're all thinking? Okay, perfect. Is that good enough to, and then move this back to, because we need to get this going quickly is the hard part, is unfortunately there's, I mean, the DPW has stepped up a lot and been helping us out a lot, but this needs to move forward quickly. So would everybody be okay this going to the next regular meeting just with that change?
Absolutely.
For approval? Okay, perfect.
Are you comfortable if we advertise it as a draft?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the updated wage.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, everybody. And, well, then, next up is to convene to closed session. Oh, I should read that. Per 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session specifically to discuss potential sale of property in the city of Columbus.
Alder Rolfe will move that we convene the closed session for state statute 19.8571, deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other public business.
Alder Motive will second.
I have a motion from Alder Rolke and a second from Alder Motive. I'll take a roll call, please, Jane.
Rolke,
Aye.
Steiner,
Aye.
Albright,
Aye.
Arnold,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
Motive,
Aye.
Reed.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. We will be convening to closed session. We won't be coming back on the air tonight for any more decisions. Have a great night.